Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Asian Vision Dialogue. So the theme for today is about the updates on Russia and Ukraine war. I am very pleased to be joined by Dr. Nyam Borodan. He is the lecturer of the Institute for International Studies and Public Policy at the Royal Museum of Phnom Penh and also at Camp at Business School as well. And so without further delay, let's join me and welcome Dr. Borodan. Greetings, Doctor. Yes. Without further delay, let's start our discussion. Yes. So, Doctor, we know that the war between Russia and Ukraine has been happening since February 2022. It's almost 2 years now, and I just want to ask what is the situation now in Russia and Ukraine war, and is the war becoming more intense? Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And first of all, I would like to thank the Asian Vision Institute for inviting me to this discussion. With regards to the Russian-Ukraine war, we have seen that it has been going on for over 2 years with the repercussion for every country in the world. And the war is still going on. And I think if we talk about the intensity, the war in Ukraine has always been intense. We're talking about the warfare on an industrial scale, and the front is extends to about 1,000 kilometers. So the war has always been intense. Although in the previous year, in 2023, the war was relatively more intense because of the counteroffensive by the Ukrainian military. However, we know that this offensive did not produce the intended result, so it has been stalled. So I think for now the war had come to a point where the front has been stagnant. It stays still. However, the intensity on the front, along the front line, is still there. But there was no major offensive by any side. So I think at the strategic level, it has been stable. But at the tactical level, the war has always been intense.
Yes. Thank you, lecturer. I want to ask about, how about the international sanctions that have imposed on Russia? I want to ask about what are the implementations of Russia's ability to weather those international sanctions, and also its ability to convert its economy into a war machine for the ongoing conflict.
Thank you. I think that question is very important as to the effectiveness of economic sanction. I have seen people asking that question, and especially they extend the question into what has Russia done, or what is the Russia's secrets that they were able to weather and withstand those sanctions. And I think that's kind of asking the wrong question, because if you look at the historical from a historical perspective, whenever Russia or the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union was going to war, they were never a rich country. The war with Napoleon, there was still a feudal country when France was modernizing its administration, and yet they can still defeat Napoleon. You look at World War II, the Soviet Union suffered a lot of problems, and yet they were able to defeat the Nazi Germany. So I think it's not just a secret, any secret that Russia has done. I think the first factor with regards to economic sanction is that if you look at the academic research on the effectiveness of sanction, most of the time sanction did not work. Instead of breaking the target, instead it solidified the resolve of the other side so that they can continue doing this. So that is one problem with the sanction. The second problem when you try to impose sanction on Russia is that you cannot close off this country. This country is very big. You cannot close off a country, and therefore there's always way to evade the sanction. For example, in the wake of the sanction, a lot of Western country has withdrawn their business from Russia. Take, for example, Coca-Cola, right? But if you go to Russia today, you can still drink Coca-Cola because it has been imported from Central Asia. right, into Russia. So you can still find Coca-Cola. If you don't want that, you can find the Russian version of Coca-Cola. So that is a small example. But immediately, after the war started, there was the sanction, and one of the sanctions that they tried to hit Russia where it hurts is to put sanction on the export of oil, fossil fuel, oil and natural gases. And guess what? There was an investigation by the South Korean newspaper. It found out that Japan, South Korea, and even the United States and several other countries that put the sanction on Russia actually still bought all these things from Russia through intermediaries, and it amount to about more than $1 billion just for the period of few months after the sanction. So there is still dependent on some of the Russian natural resources. So I think that's why the economic sanction did not produce the intended effect. Right? So these were the two factors, and I think the third factor. I met several Russian academic and Russian who have carried out research and study international relations. I asked them the same question: why Russia or the Soviet Union or their predecessor could withstand all this pressure and sanction while you're not a rich country? And their question is simple. First of all, they have unity among all the ethnic groups in that country. Secondly, the country is big. And thirdly, they have natural resources that the world needs. So when you have something like that, you cannot just cut this country off. They will survive by itself, and you are the one that put all these sanctions, you actually still dependent on that. So I think these were the factors that make it very hard to put sanctions on Russia. So whether the sanction hit Russia, it hit Russia, but it's not going to break Russia and end the war. I think that's my assessment on the effectiveness of the sanction.
Doctor, now let's talk about the support from the Western countries on Ukraine. So I want to ask, how has the support for Ukraine from the Western countries evolved over the past years, and what impact has this had on the dynamic of the conflict?
Yes, the material support for Ukraine basically come from two sources, the United States and the country of the European Union. But I think the most important supporter for Ukraine is the United States. But these countries are democratic countries, so you can never predict what the politics which way the politics will go. Okay, I think the past year has been a very difficult one for Ukraine because the offensive did not produce the intended result, and then the support for Ukraine seems to waver a little bit. In the European Union, in the European Union, many countries have to depend on the natural gases from Russia. So, the longer this war goes, the more sanctions you put on is going to hurt the people in this country. So that has always been difficult. For the United States, however, the good thing is that the president and the high-ranking official always said we will support Ukraine, and when people ask for how long, they're going to say for as long as necessary. However, in the previous few months, there has been a problem in the American political system where the two parties cannot agree on the budget. Okay, so there are a lot of issues. There is this support for the Israel in the Israel-Hamas war. There has been a question on the spending on the border. There has been a lot of question on the domestic issue of the U.S. itself, and that's tied into the budget for Ukraine. And the more this budget, is delayed, the more all these action is delayed, it will hurt the war effort, because the war is still going on. And again, this is a war on an industrial scale. So I think the previous year has not been very kind to Ukraine in terms of the support. It has not been at the same level that we have seen at the beginning of the war.
Thank you, Doctor, for your answers. I think we can go to the fourth question. Can you provide an analysis of the military strategies that employed by both countries, Russia and Ukraine, in the current pace of the war, and also how these strategies are shaping the current conflict as well?
Currently, like I said, at the strategic level, the front is stagnant. But at the tactical level, they still go back and forth between these two sides. I think, as we know, in the previous year, Ukraine has tried to carry out an offensive because they thought that you got Russia on the run, so you need to carry out this offensive. But then the offensive did not produce a lot of result. And now the question is, in 2024, what is going to happen? All right? Will there be any offensive by both sides? I think for Ukraine, another offensive seems to be difficult. The first factor, of course, is the uncertainty over the support from the Western country. And if you're taking the offensive, you need a lot of people, you need a lot of resources, you need a lot of ammunition. But right now, it's just not there. There has been talks of Ukraine developing its own capability. So there has been talks about arming the Ukrainian industry, to try to turn it into a war footing, industry with a war footing. But it's very difficult. You can produce a lot of, improvised drone, but if you want to have all these modern weaponry that the West have provided you, you need a whole supply chain in this defense industry, which takes a long time to do. So it's not, it's very hard to do it in 1 year in the current condition with regards to the ammunition. Secondly, Ukraine has tried to match the level of mobilization by Russia. I think they tried to put up a law where they want to call up 500,000 men, try to get into this. But again, from the last year, there has been a few surveys that has been done about the morale of the people, and a lot of people did not really, they were not as enthusiastic to go to war. And also there's a lot of problem between, political problem. There has not been an election in Ukraine yet because of this, continued state of emergency. And there has been problem between the military and the politician. So with all these things, it's very doubtful that Ukraine will be able to carry out a major offensive again this year. So that's on the Ukrainian side. On the Russian side, however, it's also difficult to take on the offensive this year. We're talking about the general offensive. I'm not talking about the local one. The local one is always possible, but the general offensive on the entire front, or a major strategic offensive, I think it's very difficult for Russia also. Number one, they have the election this year. So a major offensive is bound to incur heavy casualty, and it's not always good during election year. That's number one. Number two, the sanction did not break Russia, but it also hurt Russia to some extent. There had been talks about inflation in Russia. Some of the necessary food stuff have seen 50% inflation. That's not very bad, but if you're not careful, you can actually make that worse. And again, that's not good for the war effort and for the, the inflation and the election. All right. So I think Russia will be more prudent, and they're not going to take any major offensive. There could be a tactical offensive at a local level in some places, because you cannot stay still. If you stay still, the enemy will always attack you. So there can be always a local offensive. But I just don't see the general offensive, along the entire front. Also, I don't see Russia is collapsing anytime soon. Russia was very successful in framing this war, not a war on Ukraine, but a war between Russia and NATO. So Ukraine, according to this propaganda, Ukraine is just a tool of the Western country and NATO to try to, beat Russia into submission. And I think the Russian was very successful in, propagating this idea to the Russian people. So I think even though Russia cannot take on a major offensive, but they can withstand, an offensive by Ukrainian. And also recently, I think people have seen the improvement on their capability along the front line, especially electronic warfare. which is very important because there was a lot of a lot of drone use. So if you can strengthen your electronic warfare capability, that's good. And I think people have seen Russia just doing that. I think in the new year, Russia just fired missile and artillery to the Ukraine and drone to the Ukrainian city. Some see that as a way to impose attrition on the Ukrainian air defense, because the air defense is very expensive. These are modern ones, very expensive, provided by the West, and the drones are cheaper. So you can increase attrition rate that way, and that's going to create a lot of problem for the Ukrainian. There has been some military analysts who saw a possibility for the increase of the intensity of the war, in which case Ukraine will not launch the offensive along the entire 1,000-kilometer front, but they will focus their effort on the Crimea, on the Odessa and Crimea, to try to cut off that peninsula, and that can be done with relatively a small amount of troops and material. All right. Russia also probably tried to strangle Odessa, which is on the other side of the Crimea. And a lot of military analysts, it seems to me, that they see that as the potential hotspot that can increase the intensity of the war. So in short, we don't see any tendency for a major general offensive, but we could see a limited offensive to the south of the front line.
Thank you, Doctor. I think we come to the last question. So I want to ask, what do you think are the possible ways that the two countries come to a resolution? What are the prospects of a resolution to the conflict in Ukraine? Yeah? And what are the key factors that will influence the trajectory of the war in the near future?
Yeah, I think if you look at the war right now, it resembles World War I. So it has come to the stage of attrition. The war of attrition is basically the bigger side will win. So with the uncertainty of the West, with regard to support for Ukraine, that doesn't look good. Okay, and I think we started to see the attrition taking its toll on Ukraine, such as the fire of missile and drone by Russia. So this is a war of attrition, and the longer it goes, the more people will die, and the more material will be expended. So I think, in short, it's very hard to predict how this war will end, and if you can make this war end, you probably get the Nobel Prize. But I think there are three possibilities, right, that had been raised by diplomats and some analysts. The first possibility is what we call the justice approach, meaning that you need to redress the justice, meaning that all the territory that Russia had gained had to be given back to Ukraine. So that is justice. So the war will end, but I think that's difficult. Russia sacrificed a lot of soldiers to hold on to this, to protect what they say are the ethnic minority that were under repression by the Ukrainian authority. If you give up all this territory, then it's all the sacrifice will be in vain. So I think that's just very difficult. The second approach is what is called the peace approach, meaning Ukraine has to accept the loss of this territory, have to give Russia all the territory that it already taken control. So you will get peace. And for a time, this was the approach that was pushed by the country of the European Union, ostensibly France and Germany. But I think later on they changed their approach. And Ukrainian, of course, it's not going to accept this. If you are a politician, you accepted this, you go to, you're not going to be elected. Yeah. Okay. So I think these were the two approaches that have been advanced, but it's very unlikely. The third approach, however, that look more and more likely is what we call the frozen conflict, like what you have in the Crimea after 2014. In many places around the world, there will be no peace agreement. There will be no official resolution, but the front line did not move. and both sides just there was a standoff there. All right, they stopped the attrition, they stopped the attack. The attrition stopped, and then that would be the de facto border. I think that would be a more likely approach that this war could end. Right? However, do not forget the possibility that there could be an offensive by both sides in the south of the front. If that occurs, then the war is going to continue into 2024.
So we can say that it is hard to find a solution for both countries, to come to agreement. Yes. I think that's it. I think we come to the end of the discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Rodan, for joining us, and I'm looking forward to have you in the next future. Yes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Asian Vision Dialogue now has come to an end. Thank you for watching.